Hello everyone and welcome back. This is the series where I talk about myself and my life in music. There have been a lot of ups and downs in my time playing guitar, and this is part one of a two-part series where I tell you all about my best and worst musical experiences. To kick things off, I'll tell you about my worst recording session. When I was first getting the ball rolling on this whole YouTube thing, I was supplementing my income by doing session work on Fiverr, which is an online marketplace that connects people who are looking to buy a digital service with people who are looking to sell one. I would record guitar or whatever other instrument for whoever was willing to pay me. There was one girl who commissioned me to record a backing track for her song. It wasn't a very good song, which wasn't surprising. I don't recall ever working on anything that had any artistic value, but hey, whatever pays the bills. She was all high and mighty because her last song had got a lot of views on YouTube, so I went and checked it out, and it was clearly all paid for, or it was all bots. You can tell this when there's no interaction, likes, comments, but there are a ton of views. But who am I to judge? Again, whatever pays the bills. She wanted me to make her new song sound like Jason Mraz's I'm Yours, so I produced a track with the same instrumentation that I felt was pretty good. However, I got a message the next day saying how incredibly disappointed she was in the amateur sounding recording I sent her. It sounded nothing like she envisioned, and she wanted a refund. Through a series of condescending messages directed towards me, I figured out she wasn't talking about the instrumentation, but she wanted the feel to sound like Jason Mraz's I'm Yours. The problem with that was the demos and vocals she sent me were straight as an arrow, while I'm Yours has a reggae feel. So I needed to explain to this overconfident, talentless hack that in order to turn a straight song into a reggae, you need to do a major overhaul in the song itself. I also needed to explain to her that until a song is mixed, it's not going to sound professional, which wasn't a service that I was offering. I ended up redoing the entire track to get it to her liking, so for $150, I produced 2 complete tracks. Surprisingly, she left me a 5-star review. Here's my official review. Melinda, there's a good reason why you'll never be successful. Now onto the flip side, the best session I've ever been a part of. I've had the pleasure to record with some amazing artists and have done some things that I'm really proud of, but one specific recording comes to mind. It was 2009, I was living in Toronto doing my music degree, and I was playing with a traditional ska band called Sound One. It was a 12-piece ensemble, full horn section, and whenever we would play gigs, people would go nuts and dance all night. Ton of fun to be in. On top of that, we were all getting along well and were optimistic about the future. So we booked a 1-day recording session at B-Town Sound in Burlington to record a 5-song EP. We cut it live off the floor, we were each mic'd up, the engineer hit record, and whatever came out is what we kept. There was no studio magic or overdubs. The last song we recorded was called Shoot the Sky, and I got a nice long guitar solo. We ran the tune a couple times, and on the last take, I channeled my inner rude boy and unleashed something surprisingly good. We listened to the playback, and the band was like, "Wow, Sammy G, I didn't know you had that in you." It was an amazing feeling at a cool time in my life with a bunch of people I've got a lot of love for. If you want to hear that song, I'll link to it in the description. Next up is my best and worst concerts. First, I'll do the worst. There's only really one that comes to mind, and that's seeing Bob Dylan in around 2003 or so. I was a teenager falling deeper and deeper in love with music, and I would spend a lot of time listening to the classics. I discovered Bob Dylan through the Denzel Washington movie The Hurricane, which featured his song, The Hurricane. And from there, I found Blonde on Blonde, which remains one of my favorite albums to this day. When I found out he was coming to Winnipeg, I knew I needed to go. However, I didn't realize that sometime in the 80s he went through a major shift in singing styles. So when my friends and I saw Bob at the old Winnipeg barn, that came as quite a bit of a shock. All the songs were unrecognizable, even though he played a lot of the classics. The only reason I know this is because I saw the set list in the newspaper the next day. The entire show, he didn't address the audience once. He wore a fake beard and a massive cowboy hat. It was all very strange. I've come to realize that Bob Dylan now and Bob Dylan of the 60s are very different characters. I've also come to enjoy a lot of what he does now, but 15-year-old me was having none of it. The flip side of this is the best concert I've ever been to, and one specific one stands out. After high school, I did a year of university with a focus on business before realizing that that wasn't for me. I dropped out, and with nothing better to do, I went to Australia with nothing but a backpack and a guitar to figure my life out. I was looking to music a lot to help sort out my thoughts, and John Mayer's new album, Continuum, was speaking to me on a deep level. Shortly after arriving in Sydney, I found out that John was playing the Enmore Theatre. I was desperate to go, but tickets were sold out. However, I'd heard that if you call the box office an hour before a sold-out show starts, there's a chance that you can buy one of a handful of promo tickets that get returned when they aren't given out. It was a Hail Mary, but it worked. I almost missed the show because I had no idea how to navigate the public transit system, but I made it just in time. The band was amazing, and it seemed like John was even more dialed in than he normally is. That was one of many things I experienced on my Australian adventure that really solidified it in my heart that music was my path. I also want to give an honorable mention to seeing Derek Trucks here in Winnipeg at the Garrick Theatre around 2007. I got free tickets through the music store I worked at even though I knew very little about the band. It's a 300-seat theatre. I sat at the very back, and after that day I became a firm believer in the Church of the Trucks. And last for today, I'll tell you about the best and worst critiques I've ever received, starting with the worst. I had decided to go to school for music, and in order to do so, I had to pass a fairly rigorous audition process. I can't remember who set it up, but I ended up meeting up with a guy who apparently knew a little bit about music in my hometown. Well, it turns out he was a total blowhard, and when I played for him, he basically told me that I had no hope to do anything with music. Now, I will say that I had a lot of improving to do before I was ready to audition, but he made it seem like I had to be an elite professional to have any chance of getting in. The whole thing just had a negative vibe, and it felt to me like he was trying to make me feel bad for not being as good at music as he was. It wasn't motivating at all, but I put it behind me and practiced as hard as I could to get ready for my audition. I was waitlisted for my desired program, but got into another program that prepared people like me for the degree. So I guess he may have had a point, but it wasn't nearly as dire as he made it seem. One thing I took away from that was I figured out what kind of impact I wanted to have on people should I ever be in the place where people come to me for advice. I knew that I wanted to have the opposite effect. I wanted to make people feel excited about the next step in their musical journey while still being realistic. The best critique I've ever received was in the third year of my degree, and I've told this story before, but I'm telling it again. I was in a songwriting class taught by a fellow named Rick Emmett, who up here in Canada is a bit of a musical legend. In this class, we would take turns bringing in a song, playing it for the class. Everybody would weigh in before Rick finally laid out his opinions. He was always fair and respectful, but also tough whenever he saw potential in people. The first song I brought in, he tore to pieces, which set me on a path to actively try and improve myself as a songwriter. He made me realize that I couldn't just sit down for a night now and then and hope to come up with a masterpiece. Rather, I needed to practice songwriting in the same way that I had practiced guitar. So that's what I did. And the next time I brought in a song, I knew it was better, but I was still unsure of myself. I played the song. There were a couple minor things that needed fixing, but Rick told me that if I could write songs like that on a regular basis, I had a real chance at a long career as a songwriter. I became a YouTuber instead. Sorry, Rick. But it made me believe in myself and believe in my ability to improve, which was crucial in those times where the idea came squirming into my head that maybe I would be better off doing a normal person job than this whole music thing. It was a very important experience and one that I'll never forget. I ended up recording that song. It's called The Field of White, and I'll link to it in the description. That's it for part 1 of this series. If you've got some great or horrible recording sessions, concerts, or critiques you've experienced, let me know in the comments. I always like hearing from you guys. Remember, I've got shirts available over at www.shopsamuraiguitarist.com. Thank you all for watching, and an extra big thank you to everyone who supports my channel through Patreon. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I will see you next time for part 2.